Hello and welcome to DTV, your source for news and information about the Knox County Democratic Party. I'm Michael Davis, and I'll be your host for today's program segment with Virginia Couch, candidate for the Tennessee House of Representatives, District 18. This November, voters will choose the District 18 House Representative with no incumbent in the field, as Republican Martin Daniel, who has held the seat for 6 years, decided not to seek re-election. This race is set as a very big potential win for local Democrats, and Virginia Couch is the Democratic candidate hoping to take this seat in November. Virginia, thank you so much for being here with us today, and welcome to DTV.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate you and DTV giving me an opportunity to introduce myself and talk about our campaign.
You're very welcome. We're glad to have you here today. So we are still in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is why we're doing this interview via Zoom. Normally we'd be in the DTV studios, but we really appreciate you taking the time and making an effort here to do this. So running a campaign at any point is a taxing thing, but starting in the middle of a pandemic is a whole other situation. So tell us a little bit about how things have gone so far.
Well, it's been interesting. Of course, this is the first time I've ever run for public office. I have a great campaign manager we started putting together our plan and we rolled it out on March 11th. And then March 13th, we went into a statewide shutdown. And so we've been kind of redoing everything, focusing on social media, focusing on texts and emails and how to get our message out when you can't go door to door. I mean, that's the most important part, is meeting the voters and getting to talk to the voters. And so luckily, technology is our friend right now.
Definitely is in this respect. So I can't imagine how things would be going if this were, 20 years ago. No. So we're glad that we can provide a platform for you to get more information out to our voters. So Virginia, what are some of the chief things that have motivated you to seek this office?
Oh, for me, it's been Governor Lee and the Republican supermajority. Okay. They have absolutely failed to properly address the things most important to Tennesseans: health, education, financial security.
Okay. So professionally, you're a practicing attorney and an adjunct law professor, but you've also owned your own business for several years. Tell us how these combined experiences give you insights and knowledge that qualify you for this office.
Well, actually, I went to law school after helping a friend run a small business, and I saw all the legal and tax issues that he faced, a lot brought about by legislation. Mm. Small businesses are faced with having to figure out the law. A lot of times lawmakers don't think about the law they're putting into place and how it's actually going to impact people, citizens, small businesses. And so I think my background of not only law, understanding statutes, reading statutes, understanding how to draft, but also seeing the impact of those statutes. So I think beyond the drafting and how is it actually going to be implemented, how are businesses going to be affected?
Right. Okay. Obviously, women entering politics, especially in the Democratic Party, has meant a big shift and has brought some much needed change to the political landscape. What perspectives do you have about running as a woman for this seat and in Tennessee politics in general?
Well, what I want to see most is for our legislative bodies to better reflect the people they serve. We're not all white males. No offense, please. But we have a body, the state of Tennessee, I think we have like 16% of our representatives are women. That's Senate and House together. Well, we know that there's a lot more women in the state of Tennessee, more than 50%. But it's not just female. LGBTQ, minority, disabled, economically disadvantaged. We need everyone to have a voice. We need everyone to have a seat at the table. I know that's something that people love to just throw out that language, but it's true. You can't know how I feel if you haven't lived my life. And so I think we need different perspectives.
Okay. What are some of the ways that you would personally reach out to constituents that have had a very different walk of life than you in order to identify with them, to bring that perspective to represent them accurately?
It's talking. You have to be willing to take time to meet with people, ask them what's bothering them. You know, if they have a difficult economic situation, what led them to that situation? Were they born into an economically disadvantaged life, or have drugs, alcohol, or are they just on a path of low income work with no opportunity to step out of that? Are they trapped by bills, credit cards? What's gotten them there? You have to be willing to talk to the people. A lot of legislators come to the job with an idea of how to solve something, but they don't ever go back out and talk to the people and say, what would you do? As a lawyer, we meet with clients and we ask them, what's the problem you're wanting to solve? And we advise them. We don't tell them all the time how to do something. You've got to listen to the people and see what the solution is. It may not be what you're thinking it is.
True. So with District 18 specifically, what are some of the things that you've seen talking to constituents living there in the district that are the major challenges that you'd like to take on as a representative?
Well, education's big. I live in I guess you could call the normal middle class neighborhood. Lots of school kids running around, all of them going to public school. And of course they're concerned, not just about the private school voucher program, which is obviously, no matter what anybody says, the money for that program is going to adversely impact public schools. There's no way they can pay for that program without taking money that could have gone to public schools to pay teachers, whatever. But it's not just that. We aren't doing anything to prepare our kids to go to school. You know, there's kids that are hungry in District 18. You know, food insecurity. You can't go to school and do well if you're hungry. You can't go to school and do well if when you go home, you have two drug addicted parents or maybe no parent at all. You're living with your grandmother who's also raising 3 more children. I mean, we're not looking at the whole family and what we could do to prepare our children for school. And instead we're saying, oh, it's the school's fault, it's the teacher's fault. Let's just move into the private school realm. And that's not the answer.
Right.
So that I see here education more than anything. Yeah. Economic security, financial security. What a time for that to really, you know, raise its head. How many people, we see people out marching, going back, willing to risk their lives and the lives of others because they can't pay rent. Mm-hmm. No one, you know, we grow up hearing that, have a safety net, have 3 months of salary stuck in a bank.
Right.
Most people aren't there. Yeah.
Especially with the kind of, we know that the wage gap, the wealth gap really is at a time, at a large time in America that we haven't seen probably since the late 20s. So absolutely. It's kind of strange to expect that people would have that kind of preparedness for something like this at this time, knowing that reality is out there for so many Americans.
But so many politicians, that's what they think. They're like, what? Just go ahead, sit home for a month, and this will go away. But those people didn't have food. They were worried. People are living paycheck to paycheck.
And I think we see that anxiety borne out in a lot of the conflicts and the about what to do right now, whether to reopen, absolutely, whether to stay closed. I mean, some of us have a privilege of being able to work at home and have that accessibility, but it's not that way for everyone. And that adds to the direness of their situation. So if you were in the legislature right now, with knowing all these things that the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed, what would be your top priority in things to advocate for or legislation to draft or get behind?
Well, we have to advocate for health. You know, at the beginning of this epidemic, we have people who would not go to the doctor, could not go to the doctor, couldn't afford to go to the doctor. And then, of course, if they went, they couldn't have been tested anyway. But there's concerns because this will spread if people cannot afford to go and get tested and stay at home. If they're sick, people can't afford to stay at home. You know, if they're making $12 an hour and they don't have health insurance and they feel sick, they're going to go to work because their employer will probably fire them if they don't show up for work. Second, they don't have income to cover that gap. So when we have a pandemic like this, I thought Congress did a decent job. Let's make sure that people who are going to be laid off from work have an employment benefit above what they normally would get. You know, $275 a week, which is the maximum you can get in the state of Tennessee, is not going to cover what they normally would have lost. But then Congress went a little bit crazy and they gave them $600. So now we have people making $875 a week, and now they don't want to go back to work.
Right.
And so it's kind of a great idea, give them financial security, but it was, again, a case of let's draft legislation, let's get it out there, and let's worry about the impact later.
Yeah.
But we have to do something to allow people some financial security. So if this happens again, they can stay home for 2 weeks. They can stay home for 3 weeks. They can stay home for 4 weeks. And something to help the people who can't. We do have police officers, firefighters, healthcare workers that do not have the privilege of sitting at home where it's safe.
Right.
And so what are we going to do to make sure that we're protecting them? Are we going to have, you know, obviously funding for medical programs to find the right vaccine, testing. If we don't get that in place, obviously, maybe this fall, we might be right back where we are now.
Right. And there are models that predict that could happen. Obviously, I wish we had more time to talk about it, but one of those components seems to be obviously Medicaid expansion, but that's probably a topic for another interview down the road, which we hope to have with you, by the way, as your campaign progresses. So we are running out of time, unfortunately, but how can voters find out more about your campaign or even volunteer to help your efforts?
Well, go to votevirginiacouch.com. That's our website. There's places to send emails if you want to help for our campaign. We'll be starting to do a lot of calling to raise money. It's one of the necessary evils of campaigns is you have to have money, especially now when we can't go door to door meeting our voters. And also follow us on Twitter, Vote Virginia C, and also on Facebook.
Great. Fantastic. I'm sure that as things do open back up, that you'll find some opportunities for in-person voter contact. But anything else that you'd like to add to tell our voters about yourself and your campaign here? We got with about the 50 seconds we have left.
I think the most important thing is nothing will change if we keep electing the same people or the same types of people to run our government. If people really want change, if they really want representation, they've got to vote for somebody other than those in office right now. We have to have some diversity.
I couldn't agree more. So Virginia, thank you so much for being with us today on DTV.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of our viewers for keeping up with ongoing DTV programs, even in the midst of the pandemic. We really appreciate your viewership. I'm Michael Davis. This has been DTV with Virginia Couch, candidate for District 18 for House of Representatives in Tennessee. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.